So human beings have developed pattern recognition over time, and it's something that is designed to keep us safe. If you can recognize the poisonous berries, then you don't get poisoned. If you can recognize that a person acting in a specific way is no longer a safe person, like they have rabies and they're frothing at the mouth, then, we as early human beings pattern recognize that, oh, okay, this is someone that we have to stay away from now. And so, one of the ways, though, that it goes off the track is when it comes to like the isms. So, like racism, sexism, or like homophobia, transphobia, just this idea that a group is a bad group and therefore individual members of this group are bad. So, as a society, we've sort of been pushing back against that idea, sort of renegotiating like those groups' place in our structure. Uh, but we can also do this pattern recognition in the opposite way, which is to associate a group as good and then therefore members of that group as good and safe. And that's not true. So, if you are ideologically aligned with a group and you think, yes, this is a good group with good values, this is right, this is how everybody should think. And so then you meet other people who identify with that group, identify with that value set, identify with that ideology. It's very easy to think that that means this is a good person. And that is a trap. That is not correct. That is as much missed pattern recognition as racism, just in the other direction. So what you want to do is like hold the ideas lightly. So you sort of like caution flag it in your mind. So if you think somebody is like a good person and a member of like a good group and is, you know, all their values seem to be good values and their ideological framework seems to be a good the right ideological framework. That's still you hold that lightly because we want to see how people act. We want to see how people treat others. We want to see if we think other people are autonomous human beings who get to make decisions for themselves, right? Like, are they controlling? Are they controlling with the justification of their ideology, or are they holding that ideology but not pushing it on others, right? Um, we just I've noticed a lot of my queer community runs into this problem because a lot of the queer community is in the social justice space. And they're an abuser is an abuser is an abuser. They will use whatever framework they can to power over other people. The framework itself is not going to like the framework itself is like neutral. Like it's a tool. You don't unless unless you've well thought out the framework, it can be extremely difficult to spot when it's being misapplied. So there's a lot of victims of abuse in this community and particularly don't feel like they can speak up about it because they don't want to compromise the validity of the social justice concepts. So that's a big trap for y'all. Like that's a minefield. We I think we're pretty well aware of it. Like let's say in the religious sphere, you have a religious person who is using that religion to power over other people. And so I think we have a very good understanding. Unless you're in that community, you don't, the rest of us have noticed that that's how that can work. Um, but abusers, they'll take any framework that you agree with to use against you. They're like the worst lawyers, like on the opposite side. Anyway, so we want to be looking at people who are service oriented, but like that's not necessarily a slam dunk. That's a pattern recognition thing. Okay, this person is service oriented, they're highly conscientious, they have a strong sense of duty and they want to do right by their community and their relationships. So they're maybe more likely to be a good person than not. But, we know that grandiose narcissists and psychopaths, like they've clocked that pattern, they mimic it. So that's not a slam dunk. We want to be paying attention to how people treat others. Do they respect other human beings, especially ones they don't have power over or ones that they don't want anything from? How do they treat people that they have power over? This can be a very good indicator of whether or not you're dealing with a good person. But again, not a slam dunk. That's a very easy thing to mimic if you're aware that pattern exists. You can also see whether or not they respect other people's autonomy, other people's boundaries, other people's ability to make decisions for themselves, even and especially when it does not align with their own values, right? Because if you do not want a person to power over you, then you need to be looking for people who think that that's just a wrong thing to do, period. That's a person who respects boundaries. That's a person who respects your intrinsic ability to make decisions for yourself. And so it can be hard to see a controlling person in the ideological framework that we agree with because, of course, well, they're right. We are right. We agree. We think both things are, we both think that this is accurate and should be, and should be how the world works. And you don't notice they're being controlling because the controllingness seems right. You don't notice they're being controlling because it's not in your direction. So when the ideological framework gets weaponized toward you, it can be very hard to think your way out because it's right, and you want to be an ethical person, and you don't want to go against this framework. And especially if you're dealing with a smart abuser who is very good at like logicking at you and using things against you, your own words or concepts or whatever. And here's what I would say. I've had a lot of training in debate. I've had a lot of training in litigation. I've had a lot of training with argumentation. And what I would say is, if you know you're like that, if you know that you have that ability and that skill, if you know you have that level of intelligence, you know it's not okay to weaponize that against people who aren't at that level, right? You are powering over another person, just not physically, just not maybe with like emotions. You're doing it with logic. So if someone is using that against you, if they're using their higher intellect or their higher level of information, if they're using that against you, already we're wrong. Already it's not okay. You do not have to sit there and figure out, oh, are they wrong about XYZ, or why are they wrong? Or I feel like they're wrong, but I don't quite know why. If someone is trying to make you, or make you wish you did, intellectually, ideologically, they're trying to control you, they're already not in the good person list. And it's not even necessarily intentional. I've noticed younger people tend to get really like, oh, this is this framework that I believe. And it literally could be any framework. If you look at most like movements throughout history, it's usually young people that are behind them for good or ill. Young people just tend to, they really connect with an idea and have the like verve and passion and nothing to lose of it all to go forward with it. For those of my autistic people on the spectrum, we can decide a thing and think it's right. And we might be right. If you're on the spectrum, you're pretty good at pattern recognition and you might be a very smart person and also very rigid and inflexible in one's thinking. And so, you have to be able to respect that other people get to be their own people, get to make their own decisions, get to make their own choices, get to believe their own beliefs. They don't get to do that at you, right? Just like You don't get to do that at them. Um, so it's something to be aware of and put in context that while we can have indicators of quote unquote goodness, there's no slam dunk, right? And so the first thing we're going to be looking at is whether or not someone thinks it's okay to power over others, whether or not it's okay to make people do something, because that lets you know if they're a safe person to even start the process of exploring whether or not they're a good person. Anyway, I hope this makes sense, and I'll talk to you next time.